For decades, Jeffrey Epstein was known publicly as a reclusive billionaire with an unusual gift for building relationships with powerful people. He had no clear corporate empire, no major publicly traded company, and yet he maintained homes in New York, Florida, New Mexico. In elite social circles, Epstein appeared less like a financier and more like a gatekeeper, someone who connected influential individuals across industries that rarely intersected in public. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, Epstein's network had grown to include former US President Bill Clinton, Britain's Prince Andrew, and numerous high-ranking figures in global finance, technology, and academia. He funded scientific conferences, donated to research institutions, and cultivated relationships with theoretical physicists and AI researchers. On paper, Epstein was a philanthropist with a fascination for advanced science. But for federal investigators inside the Federal Bureau of Investigation, his lifestyle raised a different kind of question. How had someone with such an opaque financial background gained such extraordinary access to globally significant figures? Epstein's first major criminal investigation began in Florida in the mid-2000s. Local law enforcement uncovered allegations that he had paid underage girls for massages at his Palm Beach residence. When the case reached federal prosecutors, it had the potential to expose not only Epstein's conduct, but also the activities of his associates. In 2008, then-U.S. Attorney Alexander Acosta approved a non-prosecution agreement that allowed Epstein to plead guilty to state-level charges instead of facing more serious federal counts. The agreement effectively ended a broader federal investigation and granted immunity to potential co-conspirators whose identities were not publicly disclosed. Years later, Acosta would reportedly tell members of the presidential transition team that he had been informed Epstein belonged to intelligence. That claim has never been substantiated by any official documentation, and no U.S. intelligence agency, including the Central Intelligence Agency, has acknowledged any relationship with Epstein. Still, the statement fueled speculation that national security considerations may have influenced prosecutorial decisions at the time. Epstein's close associate Ghislaine Maxwell added another layer of complexity. Her father, Robert Maxwell, had been a media tycoon, with deep political connections across Europe and the Middle East. After his death in 1991, reports surfaced alleging ties between Robert Maxwell and foreign intelligence services, claims that were never conclusively proven in court. But his international relationships, combined with Ghislaine Maxwell's role in Epstein's social and logistical operations, prompted some investigators to consider whether Epstein's network could present counterintelligence risks. By the time Epstein was arrested again in 2019 on federal sex trafficking charges, prosecutors were examining not only the alleged crimes themselves, but also the infrastructure surrounding them. Financial transactions routed through offshore accounts, private aviation records documenting international travel, and extensive communications with influential figures suggested a level of organization uncommon in most criminal enterprises. From a counterintelligence perspective, cases involving high-profile individuals carry additional concerns. Intelligence agencies are not responsible for prosecuting crimes. That responsibility lies with law enforcement and the Department of Justice, but they are tasked with assessing whether foreign actors could exploit compromising information involving political leaders, diplomats, or corporate executives. In such scenarios, investigators may monitor developments to determine whether national security vulnerabilities exist, even if no formal intelligence investigation is opened. Epstein's detention in 2019 brought these questions into sharper focus. While awaiting trial at the Metropolitan Correctional Center in New York, he was placed on suicide watch following an apparent suicide attempt. Weeks later, on August 10th, he was found dead in his cell. The New York City Medical Examiner ruled the death as suicide by hanging, though failures in surveillance and staffing at the facility led to widespread public skepticism. 2 correctional officers were later charged with falsifying records related to their supervision of Epstein that night. Following Epstein's death, federal prosecutors continued to pursue cases connected to his alleged network. Maxwell was arrested in 2020 and later convicted on charges related to recruiting and grooming underage girls for Epstein's abuse. During her trial, testimony described a system in which victims were introduced to Epstein through intermediaries and pressured into maintaining silence through financial incentives and social manipulation. Despite years of investigation by the FBI and federal prosecutors, no official findings have ever concluded that Epstein was acting on behalf of any intelligence service, domestic or foreign. However, his ability to cultivate relationships across political leadership, financial institutions, research organizations, and international governments has continued to prompt debate among analysts about whether his activities may have presented national security risks beyond the criminal allegations alone. So the question that lingers is not whether Epstein was investigated by an intelligence agency in a formal sense. There is no public evidence that he was. The question is whether an individual operating at the intersection of wealth, influence, and secrecy might attract the quiet attention of agencies tasked with protecting national security, even when their primary investigation remains criminal in nature. Because in cases where influence can be leveraged as effectively as information, access itself can become a vulnerability. And in the world of intelligence, vulnerabilities are rarely ignored.